Because for them, it makes no sense to price it on spot. And if you buy on spot, you just get these surges, you can't deal with it. So there is no solution today that makes any sense.
It's absolutely correct, Chamath. I'll just put some numbers behind it briefly. We, with our agents, hit $300 a day per agent using the Claude API, like instantly. And that was like doing maybe 10 or 20%. That's $100,000 a year per agent.
We're getting to a place where we have to basically now say, what is the token budget that we're willing to give our best devs? And then if you aggregate it across all people, you can clearly see a trend where you're like, well, hold on a second. Now they need to be at least 2x as productive as another employee. That is actively happening inside my business because otherwise I'll run out of money.
Yeah, this is a very interesting trend that you're not going to hear anybody else talk about. But when do tokens outpace the salary of the employee? Because you're about to hit it. I'm about to hit it.
I think superstar developers are already there.
Yeah.
I think the rank and file is probably 10, 20% max. More than likely, they're spending a few thousand. The average non-technical employee is probably in the hundreds to low thousands. But to your point, the trend is what matters.
Yeah.
So unless we have some gigantic leap forward in generating output tokens at 1/10 the cost of what they are today, which I suspect we will have. So bear with everybody for a while because I think NVIDIA and Grok and Google and AMD, they're all incentivized to massively ramp up the energy density and massively push down the token cost. That's going to happen, but it doesn't change the trend. And it doesn't change the incentives on confidentiality.
这个是 All In Podcast 的一个讨论啊，讨论的是这个 AGI 级别的这个 Agentic AI 的成本啊很高，而且实际应用的一个层面啊，没有人会用10几万甚至几十万的这个高推理成本去干这个2000块钱一个脚本就能完成的事儿。虽然我个人觉得这个 token 到以后的这个价格啊会逐渐的降低啊，但是呢，人类对智能的这个需求增长速度会远远的快于这个价格下降的速度啊，而且能源的需求也是个 bottleneck。当然这是另一个话题啊。但是这些都不影响我对 UiPath 的这个 thesis 啊，越贵呢 UiPath 也有收益，越便宜呢 UiPath 也这个根本不影响这个 UiPath 的 thesis， 反而呢 agent 的数量越多，触发和编排 RPA 的流程就越多，有的许可、编排、订阅、治理服务的需求反而指数级的上升啊。下面就让我这个娓娓道来啊。最近有小伙伴私信我，问我还能不能拿啊。最近这个市场美股杀估值啊，确实也比较狠啊，包括来自这个 LLM 这个 Cloudbots 对 SaaS 公司的威胁啊。这个 Palantir 在6个月降低了大概 15% 啊 ，UiPath 呢通过这个 Q3 强劲的表现啊，股价维持在不变啊，这个空头的这个持仓啊。也达到了16%到20%，这个我只能说我毫无波澜啊，越跌我可能只会越买啊。像这样的时期，你会深刻的体会到，在买股票之前，拥有一个坚实的投资论点啊，强烈的这个 thesis 是多么的重要，没有它，你很容易就迷失了啊。尤其是在这种 SaaS 行业正在经历这种长期市场波动和动荡之中的这种情况。那些对 PaaS 持有高信念的投资者，正在与那些开始就不清楚为什么买入的人明显的区分开来啊。这和当时 Palantir 02年被打到地上6、7块钱一样的一个情景啊，很多受不了卖的，还有这个 AMD 80块钱的时候、70块钱的时候没人买，200块钱了都开始买了啊。你以为钱是什么时候挣的啊？就是这种时候挣的。请记住啊。PaaS 作为为企业 AI 部署的提供商和那些基础模型大型语言模型之间存在的是个共生的关系，不是竞争关系啊。这个 PaaS 的编排层让企业用户能够安全的、高效的利用各种 LLM 机器人释放出自动化的巨大潜力。反过来呢，这也让 Anthropic 还有 Google 这样的基础 AI能够卖出更多的 token， 赚到更多的钱啊。换句话说呢，像 Cloud Gemini、ChatGPT 其实更依赖 Palantir 这样的供商来实现这个规模化的部署，并确保他们的工具能深深的嵌入实施到企业端到端的这个编排流程中与此同时呢，企业这个客户迫切的需要安全有效的方式来执行这个 Agentic Orchestration这就是为什么PaaS 能够同时满足双方的要求，处于一个极佳的位置长期的来看AI 的格局可能会变我相信 PaaS 也会持续这个前瞻性不断的适应。在这种当前的环境下，我认为 PaaS 只会是 AI 浪潮中的巨大受益者我相信这个3月11号的这个财报我们可以期待一下我们来检验我的论点我不太相信我会错但是如果错了投资这个东西要具有灵活性，错了就要认挨打要立正但是那时候如果财报好，股价还没有起来太多，我会检视这个财报甚至 double down这个首先这个 Cloudbot 是一个面向消费者的品牌，个人的 AI 助手，这并不是 PaaS 所瞄准的市场PaaS 的核心业务是高度受监管、非常复杂的机构大型医院呀、银行呀、保险呀、政府呀这些公司是绝对不 Cloudbot 这种工具来随意访问他们的系统和数据的目前的一个新的一个消息就是说在官方 G2 发布的一个排名的上升上面有很多UiPath 的正面新闻Valuation 我已经讲了很多了我们今天随便看一下总市值60个亿6个 billion， 我们看这个 EV 等于这个 market cap 减去这个 net cash， 基本上大概是个 4.5 左右然后这个公司创造的是2个 billion 的这个 annual recurring revenue 年度经常性收益相当于你用45亿去买一个将近20亿的年正常收入的一个公司你自己会算 ROE 的你可以算一下，并且在这个 AI 时代处于这个自动化领先的地位的一个公司自己可以想象一下这个随着这个盈利的增长，这个 ROE 会不会爆发我们取掉这个 AI 编排层爆发的大故事，取掉 SaaS 公司估值的问题，我们不算这个公司我原来所说的这个 Q3 的拐点和短期催化剂这都是一个价值投资。不知道大家有没有知道这个关注过这个公司Lemonade 是个用 AI 自己用 AI 做这个保险的一个公司这个公司呢之所以涨到90块钱在高点的时候，就是 AI 的风控真正发挥了作用并且 AI 的趋势从故事变成了利润那些没有用 AI 的保险公司能和这个 Lemonade 再继续较量吗？我觉得不太可能了，因为成本控制的太低，也只会越来越低而且所有的这些保险公司只有靠 Palantir 和 PaaS 这种工具做承保、风控，做这个 AI 的 underwriting 和 risk control 才能有机会一点都不夸张我们都知道这个保险公司的 profit 基本上就是这个 premium 减去 claim 很简单的一个公式这个人工没了又少赔了，又少欺诈了，那利润是不是飞速的往上升？我在以往的视频多次强调要逆着市场走，才能寻找到在一个价格洼地又不是 value trap， 又有这个 limited downside 的这种公司的一种投资逻辑我已经在10倍股那一期说的很多了我整个的投资方法就是说买入那些我认为股市里面存在估值异常的股票，然后等待这个异常被纠正短期巴菲特说过短期股市是个投票机器，长期是杆秤所以通常我以1到2年的时间框架买入，平均持有期1年半到2年或3年之间特斯拉也是这样， Palantir 也是这样，Hood 也是这样但我的这个投资逻辑都在这儿。我介绍几本书这个安东尼·博尔顿的这个逆向投资，还有这个彼得·林奇的战胜华尔街，包括这个 Hundred Bagger都推荐看一下。这个信心很重要，这个东西不能靠别人给你而是靠自己去研究做 research这段时间呢，我已经把我 PaaS 的均价从13拉到14，又拉到了现在的12，我还在加仓如果信心不高呢，我觉得你就投点自己能输得起的钱这个要和自己的信心成正比实在不行玩个趋势交易，看其交易起来了跟个分喝个汤也行就不要 catch the falling knife 了。UiPath 真正的 MOAT AI agent 的可靠性才是企业落地的核心这往期讲过AIPath 它并不是说卖模型AI 的模型是必须要被企业信任的自动化系统，真正的护城河不是模型的能力，是可审计、可重复、合规，这才是可靠性。然后呢，这个 UiPath 的这个 evaluation 这个系统相当于 AI 的一个 QA/QC 让 AI 来评估 AI这一步让 AI 从 demo 进入企业级的生产环境 Simulation 呢，相当于 AI agent 的这个数字的孪生啊。agent 的最大风险不是不够聪明，不能做事情，是试错成本极高。你想象一下，一个财务付款付错了会怎么样？这个 agent 的总结病人的病例弄错了会怎么样？未来工业能源要是用 AI 也是一样道理，一个阀门一个报警都会带来停机会怎么样？银行的合规违规，你如果弄错了会怎么样？所以大家想象一下，还有一个很重要的就是情景记忆很多人这个直觉的认为AI 它自己用多了自动的会变得聪明这是错的它只有2个方法，一个是 fine tuning， 一个是这个 memory， 就是大模型的学习发生在版本的升级之间，不是说你每一次和它说话它就会记住不是的。这个 episodic memory 就是这个情景记忆就是 enterprise knowledge capture。这个 agent 能从历史执行、人类反馈、实际的业务流程中持续学习企业的这种隐性的经验被沉淀为系统能力，形成这个护城河我给大家举个例子，特斯拉的 FSD Palantir 的战场经验，包括多邻国包括这个 Lingo 它的教学经验，这都是 proprietary data， 这都是 MOAT所以它不只是 RPA leader它是真正的 AI 的 operating system。它的护城河不是说有更强的 AI， 而是让 AI 能够更安全、更可靠的运行企业业务，并随着企业经验不断进化目前这个市场出来很多优质的公司因为这个股价目前的这个杀估值有很多价格便宜又这个 upside 又很高的公司。这里我举几个例子多邻国、Google、Palantir 还有很多我这里就随便说几个提供参考，有机会会讲一下。我最后说一下，这个投资一定要做好风险管理，只投你可以输掉的钱长期投资一定要以年为单位我的看法不代表建议，只做参考你信心不大的时候投的钱也不要太大你信心高了你就投的多一点没关系的我觉得这个和你的信心是成正比的下面我会附上 UiPath 最新的这个视频讨论 UiPath 的这个 update他们的官网也有很多顾客的反馈可以去看记住一点，所有的产品都是从客户端来开始反馈，才蔓延到投资者和市场的它有时候这个 lag 会很长但是它总会被市场发现我最近2个月不上班更新会比较频繁，但是4月以后可能会忙一点，更新会少一点。今天就这样谢谢大家。
You have your college education or a coding boot camp, and that's your vector database of knowledge, right? And it's all nice and structured from your coursework and your tests and everything else like that. And then there's everything you learn on the job, and that's episodic memory. And that's primarily what we're focusing on.
Hi everyone, I'm Taki Jaffrey, I lead product for UiPath Enterprise Agents, and I'm joined here today by Scott Florentino, one of the engineers working on agents. Welcome, Scott.
Taki, thanks for having me.
Okay, Scott, so why don't you walk us through all the different areas you work on?
Sure. So I lead agents online reliability at UiPath. That's primarily comprised of evaluations, simulations, and memory.
Wonderful. It'll be an exciting chat. So let's start with evals. So what are evals and why should we evaluate agents?
Yeah, so evals are test cases for your agent. And testing in software has been around since its inception. And evals are just the next evolution of that. Evals are a way to verify your agent's results as well as the steps it took to get there. I think they differ a little bit from regular software testing because rather than doing exact matching, agents are a little bit non-deterministic. They might not produce the exact same result every single time. And evaluations give you the ability to account for that. They give you the ability to inspect meaning. They give you the ability to inspect and verify context, precision, and faithfulness, which is if your agent got something from a knowledge base or a vector database or a document, did its answer come from that document or did its answer kind of get hallucinated, right? So in addition to just verifying results, we're verifying how you got there and whether or not it was faithful to the trusted information that it has access to.
Okay, great. So in the UiPath Agent Builder, or if I'm using UiPath's coded agents, walk me through like what are the steps as a developer that I need to do if I'm starting from scratch to evaluate my agent?
Yeah, so there's probably three main concepts that you should consider. There's evaluation sets or data sets, and those are all your different test cases. There's your individual evaluations or individual test cases, right? And then there's your evaluators. And those allow you to grade or evaluate different aspects of what the agent did. So I talked about context, precision, and faithfulness. So those are different evaluators. You could have an evaluator on a certain field of the agent's output. There's also different types. There's deterministic evaluators. You could do an exact match or a contains or a regex, something like that. Or you could do an LLM as a judge evaluator. And those are really powerful because you can ask the LLM as a judge to look for tone. You can ask it to look for formatting, certain content that you're expecting, right? It can be a bit more flexible than just exact matches and things like that.
Wonderful. So I guess like all testing, what really matters is the quality of your tests. So in the case of these agents, these evaluation sets, or these data sets, how do I go about creating it? How do I make sure it's a good, rich evaluation set?
Yeah, so we have a couple tools available to do that. So we have our agent health score. So that's kind of a one-click option to analyze your entire agent and look at your prompt and look at your evaluations and comment on, how many evaluations do you have? Do they match the scheme of your agent? We're adding a bunch of new capabilities to that to look at, hey, maybe there's scenarios that you may have missed. We also have a generation feature, and the generation feature will analyze your prompt and look for relevant test cases based on what your agent's trying to do. So our goal is, testing has always been a challenge in software. It's typically been something that's very tedious. It sometimes takes more time than writing the code itself. Our goal is to make that a lot easier when you're building agents in UiPath, and we have a lot of tools available to make that simpler. So you can create test cases on your own. You can generate them with the help of an LLM and then tune them after they've been generated. You can also add evaluations from production runs. Just like we see things out in the wild, you have bugs that happen in production with your software. You can take that repro, if you will, and turn it into a test case and turn it into an evaluation with a single click.
Wonderful. And speaking of analogies from software testing, there's the so-called black box testing. So do you think about the agent simply from like inputs and outputs perspective, or do you also peek inside and evaluate how the agent actually got to the answer?
Yeah, good question. So you can do both. So similar to how you might mock your dependencies and then verify that your dependencies got called with traditional software mocking frameworks, you can do the same thing with what's called a trajectory evaluator. And so, obviously we want to make sure that the agent's output is correct, but we want to make sure that it took the right steps to get there and there wasn't some inherent knowledge in the model or some kind of hallucination that got it to that point. So, in addition to context, precision, and faithfulness and making sure your agent doesn't hallucinate, we also want to make sure that it went to the right sources and did the right things and consulted with the right people to get to the right answer.
Good. So now, I think let's talk a little bit about simulations, because as you mentioned, these agents might be calling all these tools, might be escalating to some humans. It could take a long time for the agent to come back with the answer. So how do simulations help me evaluate my agent rapidly and with all these rich permutations and combinations?
Right, so similar to my comment earlier about making evaluations really easy and rapid as you're building out an agent. And trying to take the pain out of testing, right? And that's been in traditional software. We allow to use this feature called simulations. And what that does is that simulates tool calls and escalations that the agent would otherwise make during its execution. So maybe these tools are expensive to run. Maybe they mutate external state that you don't really want to be doing. Maybe you don't have access to those tools yet. Maybe it's a system in production that you don't have access to, and maybe you don't have access to that system in a dev environment. Maybe there's failure conditions that you want to very easily simulate. So you could describe these failure conditions, you could describe these inputs, and we'll generate proper values that are faithful to that, and the agent will run against them. And when you use simulations, it's the real agent running. The only thing that changes is the tool call information. So you can be confident that if I have this particular scenario that I simulated, that same exact agent logic is running against my simulated scenario, and it's going to be successful in the real world as well.
Yeah, and I think that's super powerful because you're not just simulating individual tool calls, you're simulating the entire trajectory. So the simulator which is also another model. You can simulate, for example, what if the first tool call returns correctly, but the second one does something interesting, and how does that impact the third tool call? So I think that's super, super powerful to describe all these test scenarios for the agent.
And this is all, in natural language. And so rather than, setting up boilerplate code and test harnesses, you're just describing in natural language, and under the covers, we'll wire up the right schema and the right tool call mechanics to make sure everything works for you.
Very cool. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to try if somebody wants to try it in the audience. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about agent memory. What is agent memory, and how is that different from fine-tuning the model?
I'm glad you asked, because every time a customer asks me about agent memory, I'm like, what does agent memory mean to you? Because it means something to everybody, right? ChatGPT and all these apps have memory. So, what does it mean to UiPath? So I'll answer your first question around fine-tuning. Fine-tuning is about, tuning the weights of a model. It requires a large amount of data. Memory is something you can start with just a single piece of data. And how we envision memory is it's agents remembering their past interactions and remembering their past actions, combined with human feedback on those actions. So there's kind of three types of informations agents can deal with. And I like to use an analogy of like a college student starting a job at UiPath, right? So you have your basic understanding of how the world works, right? That's your foundational model. That's your your GPT, your Claude, your Gemini models, right? Basic understanding of how the world works. You have your college education or a coding boot camp, and that's your vector database of knowledge, right? And it's all nice and structured from your coursework and your tests and everything else like that. And then there's everything you learn on the job, and that's episodic memory. And that's primarily what we're focusing on. And what I really like about this is that a lot of businesses have tribal knowledge that isn't necessarily written down. And what episodic memory allows agents to do is learn from that over time. And I talk to a lot of customers who are like, how does the agent get better over time? I want it to learn and get better over time, right? And agent memory is how you do that. And how it works is when an agent runs, you can provide feedback on what it did and its result. And then what we do is we save that information into our memory space. And the next time the agent runs, it will do a vectorized search to look for similar interactions that it's had in the past. And you can tune all of this, and we have tools and evaluations to help you find optimal parameters for this. And we'll insert that into the system prompt as examples. And that will allow the agent to say, okay, I've seen this thing in the past, and here's the feedback I got. And there's papers that show that improves the quality of results. Inserting into the prompt is just the first step. There's a lot of other types of memory where you could reflect on tool calls or escalations that you made. And you can insert human feedback to any part of the agent trajectory and have it reflect on, say, oh, the last time I did this, I got bad feedback. Maybe I should do something else. And so we allow you to infuse feedback and help the agent learn and get better over time as a result.
Is the user or the developer in control of managing these memories? For example, if you want to change something, you want to delete something, et cetera?
Yes. So there's a couple of things you can do to sort of see how memory's working and play with it. All the memories go into a memory space, and you can inspect what's there. You can turn them on and off. You can add and remove them. So you have full control over what's in the agent's memory. You can see it at any time. Anytime an agent uses memory, you'll see that in our execution trail. That's OTel compliant. We emit a whole bunch of traces and spans. And you can see, on this particular run, the agent looked in its memory and it used this to try and get a better result, right? In addition to that, we have support for looking at agent memory for evaluations. So you can run your evaluations both with and without memory, and you can see whether or not your results improved. So there's a lot of different tools with memory. We're excited for folks to try it out.
Wonderful. So now let's try to bring all this together, because you shared a lot of great information. Because one of the things we are proud of at UiPath is that we help developers build enterprise-grade agents. These are reliable agents. They're not just prototypes. So how should people think about evals, simulations, tracing perhaps, and memory as part of their toolkit to build these reliable agents?
Yeah, so I think it's very easy to, we have this new vibe coding term, right? It's very easy to whip up a prototype that's very convincing. And then taking that production is very hard. And so UiPath's Agent Builder and all the features that we've talked about are tools in your toolbox and a defense in depth to say, like what I've built is enterprise grade. And I can go to the business and say, this is automating a problem, right? And this is saving the company dollars and humans. Tying this all together is human feedback, right? So agents, not only do they, can they run successfully or fail and error out, they could produce an answer and that answer may not be correct. And so human feedback is a really key part, I think, of a release cycle. And we've seen customers do this where they'll release an agent out. There was a customer doing medical record summarization. And they built an Action Center app in UiPath. And they would show the summarized medical record. And they would give that to the nurses and doctors and say, hey, provide some feedback on this summarized results. Are they correct or not? And they would use that to determine if the agent was ready to go or not. And we give you a whole bunch of tools to visualize that feedback, to take that feedback and create memories out of it and make the agent better and give you a signal that, hey, this agent's being received well by the enterprise and it's doing well.
Yep, certainly prototypes are easy, scale is hard. And one thing that I would add is sometimes if you're a developer and you're trying to automate a process, part of the approval process to take that automation to production is you need a score. You need to tell the internal stakeholders that, look, this thing works 97% of the time or 99% of the time. You need to prove that it works. And all these tools that you're talking about let people do that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Scott, for joining us. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.